Welcome to the Free and Open Mind Vcast. I'm Hardy Brooklyn.
And I'm Michelle Wild.
We'd like to thank Headshop.com for making this all possible for us today. And who are you?
And what should you be doing?
We're going to continue our discussion on boundaries today from last week with a quick recap before we move on.
So, last time, in episode 2, we were talking about the different types of boundaries. So the first boundary we discussed was material.
Material boundaries are tangible physical things like your time, your truck, your pencil, your cell phone. Like, what are you comfortable letting people use and interact with you in those things? And physical and sexual is another type of boundary,
which defines what you'll do sexually, if you want to engage with somebody sexually, if you want somebody touching you, and what's your personal boundary space. The next one is mental.
Your thoughts, your values, your opinions, your beliefs. You believe the sky is blue. You believe the tree leaves are green. The things that you're thinking, are your thoughts that are going through your mind yours, and do you have a right to believe them and have them go through your mind? And the last one is emotional. Emotional is, are your feelings and emotions dependent on somebody else? And are you changing them depending on somebody else? And are you aware of your own feelings? And are other people infringing on your own feelings and by the way that they feel? And are you allowing those to be separated?
The next thing we discussed was defining and setting your boundaries. Ask yourself, who is crossing your boundaries and why?
So one of the things we want to reiterate is most people are not really familiar with boundaries, so this is all new to a lot of people out there. And we want to think about when people interact with us, whether that's borrowing a car, having sex with us, or doing things, who makes us feel yucky in our stomach and makes it feel like, even though that supposedly was the greatest thing we did, we really don't want to do it again. So that's where we kind of start creating those boundaries and setting those boundaries and figuring out who is violating them. And we're going to get into more of that meat in later episodes.
So today, in episode 3, we are going to discuss communicating those boundaries. To be assertive and non-aggressive about communicating those boundaries once you define what they are to you. So the first thing we're going to discuss is standing up for yourself.
It's really important when you're defining your boundary, when you're communicating your boundary, and we're talking the boundaries to each other, that we do things like we stand up for ourselves. So by standing up for ourselves, it means that we're true to ourselves. We start there, is that if I do not play with people that do not wash their hands, that is my boundary. And by standing up for myself means I'm not going to let people talk me into it, convince me that that is not valid, that that's not a true feeling. And when I'm doing that, I'm trying to be calm, I'm trying to be collective, because I need to respect myself. And it's all about you and respecting yourself when you're trying to communicate those boundaries.
Yes, I think what happens is people get angry, like it does to me. You get angry at other people because they've crossed your boundary when you haven't even defined it.
And that's really important. We have to look at it by standing up for ourselves, because when we're standing up for ourselves and we're getting angry at someone for something that we haven't communicated that to them, that's not standing up for ourselves. That's blaming somebody else because we didn't do something. So when we're trying to be assertive, we have to assert what that boundary is. I have so many friends that have people do things to them that they don't like. Like, I don't like when people come up to me and shake my hand, because shaking hands is really dirty. I'd rather give a hug or a fist bump, or nowadays it's more popular because everybody's doing it. But back then, people weren't doing it. And this person constantly came up to me and was shaking my hand. And if I would have given in and shook his hand, I'm not respecting myself. I'm not saying, oh, he does it a different way, his culture's a different way. I have a boundary. What reasoning for that? That's irrelevant. But I stood up to myself for long enough, and now all of the world says you don't shake hands, you do fist bumps, and you do hugs.
But I think what happens, too, is that if you don't tell somebody, the more often it keeps on happening, you get more angry, and then you get to the point where all you feel is when that person wants to engage with you and meet you is anger. Because that's all you're seeing, is that they're just crossing a boundary instead of you asserting your boundary.
So when we're doing this, we want to look at it and we want to be polite. We want to be calm. We want to also be confident in what we're saying. And we want to take the anger and the emotion out of it, because when somebody looks at you and says, everybody else is having sex without a condom, you know what? You can have a million reasons why you don't want to have sex without a condom. It's irrelevant. You don't want to have sex without a condom.
Right.
Everybody else is doing it. Are you going to do it? Everybody else is running across I-95 when there's no traffic and everybody's flying at 100 miles an hour, and half the people are getting hit by a car. Everybody's doing it. Are you going to do it? So we have to look at it, and we have to respect ourselves. And we have to constantly state the boundary. And if it's a boundary that it's real easy to state an alternative action, we should definitely do that, because it makes it easier for someone to remember it and to honor it.
I also think, from my personal, experience, is that when you do define your boundary and you do tell somebody, that's really empowering. And if they don't accept it and they look down at you, then maybe they're not really the person you want to kind of be around, if they're not going to respect, your beliefs and what you want and what you desire.
And that leads to, do not apologize for what you're doing. You do not have to say, oh, I'm sorry. Hey, I really don't like playing with people that, don't wash their hands. I'm so sorry, guys. No. I don't play with people who don't wash hands. That's my hard line on the wall, and that's it.
So can I bring up another feeling, like if that happens in that situation where you're saying, I'm not going to have sex at a party because, they want me to not wear a condom, and I'm not for that. What if you feel like left out? Like, I want to belong. So in order to belong, I'm going to kind of bend my boundaries and my values a little bit. I mean, what do you feel about that? How do you feel about that?
I personally feel that you belong to yourself first. And I've been put in so many situations where I have boundaries put up that say, I don't do these things with certain people. And there are times where I've been put in situations where I could play with lots of people, lots of beautiful, amazing, fun people doing all kinds of fun, crazy things. But because people in that situation are violating my boundaries, I get some FOMO. So how do I solve that? I go outside and I smoke a joint. Or I go outside or I hang out with people that are going to be supportive of my boundaries and respecting of my boundaries. I will not go back to that party again. I mean, I've walked into parties where, consent at the door. What does consent at the door mean? So my boundaries already been violated because they're not giving me permission to take away to make a decision. So we have to figure out where we want to be and who we want to be with while we're enforcing the boundaries. And we also have to always be firm, polite, confident, and don't start fighting, because it's not going to go anywhere. It's like trying to convince a Trump supporter that Trump did a bad job as president. That'll never happen, because everything has been respun in their mind by different influences than you have.
Right. Exactly. So another thing, you said don't apologize. If confronted, simply state that your boundary is important to you.
So how many times do you feel that when we go out to a party, it doesn't matter whether it's a Fat Tribe party or anybody's party in the city, or even going to the House of Yes, how many times do people's boundaries get violated, or how many times do people get confronted about those boundaries? Constantly. I mean,
constantly. I mean, most women do.
And then what do you do? Like, for instance, when somebody comes up to me at the House of Yes and says, "Oh, can I grind against you?"
At least they're asking. And
then I say no, and then they do it anyway.
Well, the times that I've gone to the House of Yes, and I'm not knocking the House of Yes, I love it there. I've had a couple of guys just grab my ass, and I just turned around and I just told them that's really inappropriate. I don't think that was right what you did. I try not to get angry because he didn't know, and maybe he's a little intoxicated. That doesn't mean you're not responsible for your behavior. But I speak up. And I found when I didn't speak up for myself, I felt really crappy because I didn't stand up. And now this guy violated me in a way. And it makes you feel like a child, like you have no control over what's going on. So, and once I learned how to stand up for myself and be firm in what I believed in and my boundaries, like that night that guy grabbed me, and I just looked at him like, really? And he actually ended up saying sorry.
And they do. Most of
like he didn't, he played it off like he didn't realize what he was doing, even though he did, and I just said something. But he's always looking for that one girl that's going to not say anything.
Right, there's always going to be that one girl that has, or guy, that has that FOMO, that fear of being missed out, or he could have been the one, or he could have been the greatest sex of my life, he could have been my fantasy one, she could have been the night of my life, she could have been the one that let me do everything that I wanted to do. So, and those people that are saying yes to those people and allowing their boundaries to be violated, they're not being true to themselves. They're not standing up for themselves. And not only that, but they're allowing everybody around them to violate everybody else's boundaries. It makes it harder for me to enforce my boundaries. And it does. When I go out to clubs, or even especially Brooklyn Bowl, when I go to these venues and I get hit on or I have things happen, I am constantly being coaxed by the other men around me. Oh, she's cute. Let her give you a blowjob in the hallway. I'm like, really, guys? Come on. Or things like, oh, it's the bro code. Come on, go for it. And things like that. And I have certain boundaries that they'll be like, oh, just do that drug. Well, my boundary is I don't do that drug. Or just have a drink. I don't drink. I haven't drank in 15 years plus. And not drinking in 15 plus years, that's a really hard boundary to enforce.
Yeah. I think the magical word here also is integrity.
And do you have it on yourself? Do you consider yourself have integrity, and do you value yourself? Do you respect yourself? That's what you have to figure out. And if you're going to respect yourself and you're going to speak up, most people are going to react, if they're not that intoxicated, in a positive way.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, I think everybody experiences that, like becoming an adult, learning through your experiences about how to really stand up for yourself. And once you do it once, at work, at home, with your friends, it starts a whole snowball effect, because it's really empowering that you took a stand for yourself, you defined it, so you actually negated getting angry, you negated having an argument and yelling at somebody, because you stood your own ground, and now your feet are a little bit more stable. Yeah, like a little bit more, the root has gone down in the ground for you.
And what happens over time is all of these internal challenges that we have to our boundaries, those start to break down. The more you enforce your boundaries and stand up for your true self, the more that those beliefs that you're crazy, people don't do boundaries, the fear of missing out, all of that stuff slowly over time. I mean, yes, I still have some fear of missing out, and I've been enforcing that boundary now for 4 years. And yeah, I still have it, but I respect myself, and I know that if I break that boundary, I'm going to feel like shit the next day.
Yeah.
So I make a decision that missing out, who cares? There's always going to be another party. There's always going to be another event. There's always going to be another whatever you want to do. You can always recreate it yourself better.
Yeah. So the next thing we're going to be talking is about challenging boundaries. Internal challenges. So our current culture gives us more bad examples than good examples.
We look at that, and
so true.
Let's unpack that. So culture gives us bad examples. People in politics, they do not have good boundaries. People on TV do not have good boundaries. People in clubs do not have good boundaries. People at home do not have good boundaries, because they've never been done from the heart. They've always been done from, society says this action is not supposed to happen, or this action is not appropriate. And then they slap something together, and then the person's okay with their ass being squeezed, or the person's okay with their ass being slapped, or the guy's okay with people playing without washing their hands, whatever it might be. On TV, we have boundaries. Search warrants. Do I need a search warrant? Oh, I'll get that later. On TV shows all the time, they're constantly violating the law, which is essentially a type of boundary, which lets us know it's easier. Or when people go out, oh, have another drink and then you'll want to have sex with me. That's an example of getting somebody past the boundary that's constantly portrayed on TV, whether it's the movies or TV. So we're constantly given these examples. Or why do I not have to wear a mask when everybody else in the world does? Or why do I have to pay tax when everybody else doesn't? So we're constantly being shown where the rules that society has created to make it functional are constantly being violated. So So it makes it hard for people to see their boundaries and accept them because the rules that they have are constantly being violated. And when they create their boundaries, people laugh the first couple of times. Oh, even your mom will be like, oh, that's crazy.
So I also think that creating a boundary and saying, like, going back to the reference of the party and not wearing the condom, your boundary is your safeguard. That's what's keeping you safe. That gut in you is telling you that, like, you know, in the end, like, your fear of missing out is just one aspect of it. The other aspect is that it might not turn out to be as great as you thought it might be. You might end up, getting pregnant. You might end up getting, some, STI.
Or even a regular disease nowadays.
Yeah. So, I think for me, I realize that my boundaries are to safeguard my emotional well-being, my heart, and my mind. Once you realize that, it's like having a fort, right? So you want to make sure that your fort is sort of like has guards on the outside before they actually come into the inside. So that's what you're doing. You're sort of just building a base to keep yourself safe.
And as you do boundaries more and more, and you do them well, more people around you do boundaries well and more and more. When I started doing boundaries, it was me and pretty much one other friend that was kind of helping me. And now, all of my friends have done boundary workshops. All of my friends have come to my boundary workshops. All of my friends enforce boundaries in and out of us communicating. And it really does make for a much better, altruistic, fun, happy, comfortable, safe environment. Because I know that whatever I want to do at this party or this event or this person's house, they're not going to hurt me. They're not going to do anything to me that I don't say yes.
You feel safe. Right? That's exactly what I'm saying. You feel safe, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. You're okay.
And it takes a long time because all of these boundaries that I've set around sex and drugs and going out and doing things, all of those boundaries don't exist anywhere in physical world. They're all up here in my mind. So it's not like a boundary is a river, a boundary is a fence, a boundary is a door. But a boundary that says, I don't have unprotected sex, where is that boundary? It doesn't exist. There's no physical wall that's created to stop it. So it's something that I have to create, and it becomes hard for other people to enforce it because they can't see it.
Right. Yeah.
So we constantly have to keep reminding them.
So I have to say that I am also a pro-dom, a mistress, and one of the big things for us is about negotiating and boundaries. So I learned that a long time ago about having to define not only my boundaries, because I'm allowed to have them too as the person that tops somebody, but also the person that I'm, that is bottoming to me, what their boundaries, what their hard limits are, and not to pass that, because you don't want to. I'm not here to violate anybody. I'm here to have a good experience, not just for me, but for them as well.
Because if she violated those boundaries, or they didn't communicate them properly, and a lot of what she has to do, and what a lot of tops, doms, escorts, all of these adult social workers have to do is they're spending so much time trying to educate or communicate to their clients what boundaries are, that it should be so much easier in the world because they would be safer if we can do this.
Right.
And people in this world, like when you go see a John, or you go to a femdom, or you even go to the barber, people don't like change, and not only that, but they don't like to be told what to do. And that's the way they perceive it.
That's the way they perceive it.
That's the way they perceive it. They're perceiving this as something they're told to be do. People don't go into the supermarket without a mask. I mean, right now when we're shooting this, there's a worldwide pandemic going on, and people should be wearing masks. And literally today on the subway, I was going to an appointment, and coming there, some guy gets on the subway without a mask and gets confronted. I said something, and then somebody else said something. And he was like, I don't have to wear a mask, I have a right. And the answer that the other gentleman on the subway said, which I thought was really interesting, is in today's day and age, if you put underwear on, you got to put a mask on when you leave the house. They're the same.
Right. So now it's become a in New York, we'll just speak about New York, like a state, a communal boundary for everybody that everybody sort of has to comply to. And see what happens when somebody doesn't, it gets other people angry. you know?
And why is that person getting angry? Because this other person is violating a boundary to them, which they perceive as like, hey, this guy is not respecting me because we're supposed to be wearing masks to keep ourselves safe.
Right. So
and other people safe.
Right. So he crossed everybody's boundary in the subway. Everybody's. Right.
And then when we look at other places in the country, it's okay not to wear a mask because they have a different respect for the government and they have a different respect and a different perception of what's going on. How do I, as somebody from New York, like I've literally had to tell clients, I can't travel because I don't want to be put in a situation that's going to violate my boundary. And we want to think about that. When people are challenged them, do we want to keep going back to people that are challenging our boundaries?
Right. Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, if someone isn't respecting your boundaries and they're harassing you and pushing you, I don't really think that person's really kind of your friend, or they have an agenda and they just want something from you.
And
I mean, something that you don't want to give, and then eventually you're going to give it. And under what pretense are you giving this? You're coerced into something. That's not cool. That's not cool.
when we look at our boundaries and we look at people that are challenging them, we have to also look at who is challenging them, how are they challenging them, and is other people challenging them the same way? And that's some of this information that we're going to talk about in the next episode.
So the other thing which I was going to bring up is about being inconsistent about your boundaries. Inconsistent or your boundaries change depending. Like I've gone to, I went to this one sex party, I didn't want to wear a condom, but I went to this other one, but I felt like really safe and okay, and I decided to do it.
But that's not
so
okay.
So it's situational, or is it just like this hard kind of line that's driven in the sand, in concrete, like, okay, I'm not ever crossing this boundary? Because I've had certain boundaries, and over time, some of them have kind of like been a little muted.
That's really a deep conversation. That's going to probably be something that we talk about in the next episode, but that's something that we're going to touch right now before we wrap up. And the thing that we're going to touch on that is, when we think about modifying a boundary, changing a boundary, what changed it? Did you feel more comfortable because of a substance? Or were you on a different drug? Were you on a drug, period, that made you want to violate the boundary? Were you with that? Were you there during that boundary violation with somebody that you wanted to impress and not wanted that fear of being left out? What caused you to want to change that boundary? And when we think about what does that, that is where we take a step back and realize, wait a second, did I really want to break that boundary? Right. But then there are times where, with certain people, in certain situations, maybe not the condom one, but maybe other ones, there are boundaries that do change and do move. So I have different boundaries as far as what drugs I do when I'm with different people. I have certain boundaries with what type of sexual interactions I have, depending on who I'm with. So your boundaries can be contextual to people and to scenarios, but you've also got to be conscious of, if you're going to break that boundary, where is all that meat coming from? Because if you break that boundary and then you get the STD, are you going to be okay with that? Right. Or you get pregnant. Right.
Good point.
You have to really take a step back, and in the moment, you make that decision, but you've got to be willing to live with that decision because you're ultimately the one that's making it. Now, if you take alcohol, drugs into situations, legally you can't modify that boundary or make a consent statement anyway in most states now. Right.
The other thing is that you will need to remind people of your boundary because they're not going to remember, for sure.
Over and over and over again.
And it's okay. It's okay to them. When you're not nagging them, you're just, reminding them, and you're just standing up for yourself. You're just, people aren't going to remember. Just know that.
How many people run red lights because they forget, or whatever reason they want to give?
Or forget your birthday, it's a variety of things people get. I forgot. I came here all the time, and I totally forgot his address and had to come here. It just happens. So try to be patient with somebody that doesn't remember. Don't get angry at them because they don't remember. You are not the center of their universe. They are their own center of their universe, just like you. So just be conscious of that.
And new things are hard and scary. Change is hard and scary.
Right.
And change takes time, even though everybody's like, oh, change is happening all the time, all around us, every single day. It does. But directed, clear, targeted, calculated change, that's really hard because it's just not going with the flow, except once you get really good at boundaries, everybody else acceptance of them goes with the flow.
I have to say, it's like training a dog. Like, you tell somebody enough times and you're in that same sort of situation enough times, they finally get it. And I'll tell you, it's really empowering when they're like, you know what, Michelle doesn't really do that. And but it's okay. You know what I mean? So
Right.
now they've accepted you, they've indoctrinated your boundary, and they'll be conscious of it just as much as you're conscious of it now.
And they'll be supportive of you. And if one thing that I've noticed in the past 4 years is that the people that have been around me that I've enforced my boundaries with, they've started to enforce way more boundaries than they ever have before.
Yeah, well, that's always happened. So, and the last one is change is hard, and it doesn't happen overnight. We already discussed that.
So just remember, this is hard. You're going to have a million setbacks. You might go 10 feet forward, 7 feet back. You might go 10 feet forward, 32 feet back. If you just commit yourself to do it, and it takes about 2 or 3 months, really, before people, I don't know now that nobody's going out and seeing other people, but if you're working on it with your spouse or your partner or your family member or your roommate, because a lot of these boundaries we might be working to set just on general life things, not just sexual. It might be like, come in the kitchen when I'm cooking dinner. It might be, clean the bathroom or put the toilet seat down. All of these things that happen in our lives that we're setting, I don't like to interact with people, I don't deal with people. We can start enforcing them now, and the best place to practice is with your loved ones.
Oh yeah, a boundary can be like, I need an hour to myself in the bedroom by myself, taking a bath, whatever. That could be a boundary, right? Right. So we could start with that. So we want to also thank Headshop one more time, HEADSHOP.com, for sponsoring us. Yay!
And this is the free and open mind Vcast, where who are you?
And what should you be doing? I'm Michelle Wild.
And I'm Hardy Brooklyn. Thank you very much for tuning in.
And we'll see you next time.